Happy Thanksgiving, and I hope you're excited to start a new book here on Busy Book Club. If this is your first time seeing a Busy Book Club video, welcome. My name is Mike, and on this channel we read new and interesting books so we can have new and interesting ideas. Today we are reading the introduction to The Geek Way by Andrew McAfee. So why this book? Well, I really liked all the talk about geeks, and to explain what I mean, I'm going to read a passage from the book. Geeks care about their passions a lot more than they care about mainstream opinion. As dictionary.com put it, a geek is a peculiar person, especially one who is perceived to be overly intellectual, unfashionable, or socially awkward. Jeff Bezos embraced the unfashionable aspect of geekdom in Amazon's 2011 shareholder meeting. In response to a question about how the company innovates, he replied, "Very importantly, we are willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time." Geeks aren't concerned about going with the flow. They'll go wherever their inquiry takes them. McAfee is basically saying that geeky companies aren't reactive. They just stay focused on the questions in front of them, and they don't let themselves get swayed by any particular fad of the day. It's like how so many companies felt pressured to add AI to their products just because the market was so focused on AI in the moment. Now, a geeky company probably would get to AI quite early on, but it's really about the impetus for that line of inquiry. Is the geeky company exploring AI out of their own curiosity, or are they doing it because they know their shareholders want them to? That's the big difference. Now, the intro also reminded me a lot of No Rules Rules by Aaron Meyer and Reed Hastings. This is one of my favorite books about company culture. In a nutshell, it's centered around the idea of freedom and responsibility. Basically, Netflix employees are given a lot of agency, but they also have the responsibility to match. And it runs counter to the more bureaucratic approach where many layers of approval are required to make anything happen. The problem with that approach is that it makes it really hard to decide on anything, and it spreads the responsibility so broadly that if something bad does happen, it's really hard to figure out where it went wrong. Now, I think this more bureaucratic approach is a follow-on from the Industrial Revolution, where if you want to produce thousands of goods, you want to eliminate variation to reduce errors in your process. And when you apply the same thing to people, you end up having each person focus on a smaller and smaller number of tasks, effectively reducing their scope. And on paper, it sounds great, but what you gain through that standardization, you end up losing in motivation, because no one really likes being treated like a machine. They like having ownership of their work. Now, what drew me to this book in particular was the connection between this idea of agency and being self-directed to the Montessori method of education. I had heard of Montessori before, but in my mind it was a very fringe thing. It's a learning method that emphasizes independence and what children are naturally curious about. It does away with things like grades and tests and those natural evaluation mechanisms. And it turns out that Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the founders of Google, and Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, they all went to Montessori schools. And it turns out that the founders of many innovative companies, we don't get exact statistics in the book, actually went to Montessori schools. Growing up with this sort of self-motivated, curiosity-driven way of learning, is that something that they were able to infuse into the culture of their companies later on? Is that perhaps one of the secret ingredients to the success of tech companies? I don't know, but hopefully we find out in the rest of the book. Now, some questions that I want to ask before we go into the book are, one, what defines the geek way? I'm sure there are many companies that have elements of what Andrew McAfee calls the geek way, but what are the exact parameters, indicators that let someone know that a company is being managed in this way? Question two, why does it work? And is there anything the average person could leverage in their day-to-day? Like if you work at a company that isn't one of these modern tech companies, could you somehow infuse the geek way into an existing culture? And finally, number three, what are the pitfalls of the geek way and how can we mitigate them? Because with every new approach, there are always downsides, and the best thing we can do is understand them so that we can keep them under control. Now, let's see if we can get some of these questions answered as we move through the book. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you'll like and subscribe, and I will see you next time for Chapter 1, The Fourfold Path to Geekdom.